Welcome to Burr Cashflow Investors. And today we are doing Q&A. So we have a bunch of questions. That came in were related to the auction properties and buying properties at auction. So today we're going to talk about how do you buy properties at auction, what kind of properties there are, what are some of the benefits, what are some of those, what is something that is kind of a pain point when you're doing that. And then what is there is a lot of pros. There are a couple of cons, but most of them are pros, which is it's actually a great place for you to find a lot of good properties. So it's not something that is negative at all in terms of buying properties. So just keep that in mind. So having said that, let's get started. As always, make sure you invite your friends, invite your family, and remember that the 3-day is coming up in July, and especially the tickets that are for VIPs. Those always go. In the end, none of those are left, and then people are like, well, I couldn't attend, I couldn't do the lunch with all the panelists, with all the guests that we have come in. So it is something that is really, really, really important. I mean, if you're serious today about doubling down in terms of or getting your real estate career up and running, this is an event you must be at. So make sure you register. It's andrewholmesevents.com. It's andrewholmesevents.com. So make sure, and then I'll have Miss Jennifer put that in the bar below so that you know exactly where to go. Having said that, let's get started. So what are the pros and cons for buying a property through Hubzu and similar websites? So what is a plus, kind of what is a minus, that sort of thing, and how does that help you and when does it hurt you? So first thing we have to understand is what are the websites that we're talking about. So one is Hubzu, two is Xome, you're right, Xome. So instead of home, it's just an Xome. Number 3 is auction.com. Number 4 is realtybid.com. And number 5 is hudhomestore.gov. Don't go to hudhomestore.com because that one is somebody privately owns that, and hudhomestore.com is the official government website. So today we're going to talk about online auctions. So this is important to understand the distinction, right? Because the auctions that happen in place, like meaning they happen in person at the sheriff's sale. So in Illinois, those auctions are called sheriff sales. In other states, they're called trustee sales. In Florida, they're called trustee sales. In Texas, they're called trustee sales, right? So it's the same word, just said differently. Now, those are not auctions we're talking about today. Those auctions are a lot more dangerous. There's a lot of sharks there. And please, for God's sake, do not go bid on it unless you're from Mastery, you're from Platinum Mastery, then directly talk to us. Obviously, we will help you with that and you will be safe. But please do not go and mess with it unless you're a super seasoned investor. So, but the online auctions are much safer. That's the first thing to understand. And what properties are being auctioned off? 99.9% of the properties that are being auctioned off are properties that have gone to the foreclosure sale, meaning sheriff sale, and almost 80% of them end up not selling there because the price was too high, nobody bid, blah, 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 whatever, right? And so at that point, they end up becoming properties that are REOs, bank-owned properties, which is called a real estate owned. That's the term. When a bank owns a property, it's called real estate owned. That's an industry term. So basically, these are those properties. So these properties are listed on websites like Hubzu, on Xome, on auction.com, on realtybid.com, on HUD Home Store. HUD Home Store happens to be all the properties that are HUD Homes. Those are the properties that go on there. So that's number one. So what are the basic pros and cons? So the pros are it gives you more access to inventory, right? So instead of being in the MLS, a lot of people, when you go on these websites, there are all these properties. A lot of people, regular people, are scared of those because they don't understand the process. It's kind of complex and they get scared. And so they don't even look too much into it. And generally, this is a general rule, that the competition is not as high, right? Now, the other side of it is this, that the cons are that the banks play a lot of games because these are not necessarily going through the MLS. When a property goes through the MLS, now this may be listed on the MLS, but it'll be listed as a auction property. And when it's listed as auction property, the banks have a lot of leeway to be able to play games. So I'll give you an example of that. By games, what I mean is they'll put the property on the market. Like I've been bidding on a property and I must have bid on that property at least 9 times, same property, right? It goes to auction, somebody overbids, and they're like, oops, somebody else won it. And guess what happens next week? Again, it comes back. So there's nobody bidding, and I'll talk about this at a little bit later point, or somebody may be bidding. Clearly, they're not bidding the kind of numbers that the bank wants, right? So I stopped at a certain price, which was my threshold price, right? And at that point, I'm like, okay, I'm not going to go any higher. And the bid keeps going. So that's called proxy bidding, meaning the bank is bidding on their own property. Now, think about it. This is online bid, right? So I don't know if it's Rakesh Kutrapali sitting in New Delhi, India, eating a samosa and some chicken tikka and bidding on the damn house, right? How do you know, right? You don't. So, and the problem is when you read their paperwork in the fine print, it says the bank may appoint a proxy bidder, meaning that's like me saying that I'm going to go, let's just say, right? I'm going to go and I raise beef. So I have a big heifer for sale, right? I go to the market, it's my heifer, right? And I just basically start bidding on my own cow where I'm like, to bump up the price. What am I doing? I'm manipulating the market, right? Because if I'm bidding on my own product, who's the money going to go to, right? It just goes from my pocket to the auction company back to me anyways. That is called manipulation. And I know it should be illegal. It's not, right? I don't know how it's legal, but this is just what it is. And you can get mad about the process, but this is what the banks do. The reason why these auction sites came into being, this was during 2008, 2009, the mortgage meltdown, because they needed another avenue where they could artificially gin this up. So if you're watching this in Chicago, right, you guys know Rosemont. They used to do these big auction things where they would basically have somebody talking really, really fast, a bunch of people, and they'd create this hype so people felt that they wanted to bid. I mean, I went to a few of those auctions. They had a book, thousands of people in the audience, and people are paying stupid prices. Why? Because there's so many people there. That creates an artificial demand. So that's what they're doing online. Now, having said that, the good part about it is that it gives you and I more inventory to bid on, right? More inventory to look at, because most people don't understand this. They get very frustrated and then they let the property go, right? And so what you have to understand is this is a game. You just have to learn how to play it. Like this particular property I've been bidding on, and this is probably the 7th or 8th time. For months, this is going on, right? I keep bidding every time. Every time they keep supposedly somebody's bidding higher, and clearly the bank is not getting a legit buyer for the price that they're trying to basically kick the property up to. So if I get it, great. If I don't, I don't. I'm going to just continue. Each time it comes up, right? Each time I'm going to continue to bid. And I've had properties that I've gotten at a great price. I offered more before. I mean, I remember, I'll never forget this. There's a property in Lyons that I offered $85,000. Literally 4 months later, I got the same property for $70,000 because they'd run through the cycle, gets to winter, and guess what? They dump the property, right? This is just how it is. So, and in that, I did something called change of condition. So what happened was, I was there with Mastery, and so I got the property under contract as an auction. It's as a sale, mind you, right? That they're saying, hey, we're not going to do any repairs. The property's bad condition, right? Now, when I went and looked at it, I could see the roof was basically pretty much at the end of its life. It's curling and the whole 9 yards. And when I looked at the property at that time, It was curling, so I knew it was the end of its life. I'm going to have to put a new roof. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But when we all went on the weekend as a group in Mastery, what had happened was there was a blue tarp on it. And this was the funniest thing. I'll never forget this because it was a pretty cold winter day. And we all went in, and I'm like, hey, guys, I'll take a bet with anybody in class, $5,000 bet. If I can get a $7,000 reduction on the price. And like, Andrew, it's an auction property. I thought you said you can't do that because they're going to cancel the contract. Oh, we have tried. I'm like, well, no, this is based on a change of condition. What does that mean? What that means is that when I saw it, even though the roof was in bad condition, now, is the guy from the bank coming to Lyons, Illinois and looking at that? No, he's relying on a report. The report's going to say, well, the roof was leaking and we had to put tarp on it. Was it leaking when I saw it? No, it was terrible. It could leak, but it was not leaking, right? And hence, I basically said, hey, listen, there is a change of condition. Same thing, if I bid on a property in a certain condition, and before I take it to closing, the property burns down, right? I have agreed to buy the property as is where is, but in the condition that I saw it, not in the condition that half the property is burnt down. That's called change of condition. So either they have to give me a big enough discount where I agree to it, and I say, okay. Otherwise, I'm like, hey, I'm off, right? You can't do anything about it. So that's how the online auctions work, and that's an advantage. On that particular property, I got a roof estimate on that for $9,500. Now, I knew it was not going to cost me $9,500, but guess what? I got the baddest roof guy out there to give me an estimate. And the bank is like, oh my God, this is too much, blah, 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 so on and so forth. They said, okay, well, we're going to come down to, they first offered me $7,000. I went back. Then they came up to $7,500. I'm like, okay, done deal. I got the property roof done $4,200 or $4,300 at the time, right? And that's it. So that's called change of condition. That's the sweet part about it. If you know how to negotiate with the bank in this particular situation, they will do that even though it's a bank-owned property. Now, excuse me. Okay, so all right, excuse me. I think something went down the wrong side of my throat. Okay, so now let's talk about what are the benefits of buying via auction. So one of them, we talked about it, that one of it was it gives you access to more inventory, right? Number two, the normal person doesn't understand this process. They get extremely frustrated with this process, and then they give up, right? The other part is that some of these properties you have to pay cash for, cash. If there is somebody living in the property, there's a property I'm buying, western suburbs, and this is a property where there's somebody living in it, right? It's basically a relative of the old owner, supposedly, and they just won't move out. So I think I got the property at a great price, so I'm going to have to basically file an eviction, do whatever is necessary to get them out. That's one of those. Now, there are other properties where they will say in the listing, right in the listing, that, hey, this is a property you can get financing on. If the property is vacant, generally, you can get financing on that property. You can go to a National RE Funding, right, which we have available. It's National RE Funding, and we will be happy to fund your deal. So this is a hard money lender that there's a bunch of lenders actually we work with for Mastery, and that's available to everybody that's watching. You don't have to be in Mastery for that. And they will fund your deal as long as the property is vacant. And so the only thing you have to make sure is these properties are vacant or not. That's something important to pay attention to. The next thing is, what is the difference between auction.com versus hubzu.com? Auction.com allows proxy bidding, so the banks keep bidding against you until the reserve price is met. Very true that on auction.com, Exome does a similar sort of a thing. So they do that, but just because they want to keep driving the price up to the reserve doesn't mean you have to keep bidding. You have to have discipline. I'll never forget a few years ago there was somebody who from Mastery, and he was from Philippines, right? And he's so excited. He's like, Andrew, this is the secret. I'm going to start bidding on these properties. I'm like, hey, man, listen, before you do this, let's sit down. Let's come up with a strategy. So we came up with a number. We went through the Mastery calculator. We came up with a number, and his number was $68,000 is what he was supposed to bid. That was his going to be a high bid, right? I'm like, don't get carried away. No, 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 no. I'm Filipino. We're cheap. I'm like, okay, good. Guess what? Comes back like with this worried look to the office. He's like, I think I got a little bit carried away. I'm like, okay, well, what did you buy it for? 72? He's like, I'm like, 75? He bought it for 86. I'm like, dude, in the Philippines, is 68 and 86 both the same thing? He's like, yeah, oh my God, I got so excited, blah, blah, blah. At that time, right? At that time, I mean, we had to go through hell and back to get him out of the contract and get his earnest money back. But I mean, I can't promise you that even if you're from Mastery, if you go do something crazy like that, they'll keep so what they do is before you bid, they will ask you to put up a credit card. And they'll put up anywhere from $1,000 to $2,500. Generally, the deposit is $2,500. And they just put a hold on it, right? They're not taking the money. They put a hold on it when you're bidding, right? If you don't bid or you don't win the bid, it gets released, right? So you don't have to worry about it. But then that occupies that space on credit. So if let's just say you only have $3,000 in credit on a credit card, and then they'll block it for a couple of days and you make some sort of a purchase, $1,000, your credit card may get blocked. So it's important to think about that. Also, what's important to understand is that if you go and basically bid on each property and register for each property separately, right? And you don't do the same registration, then what is going to happen is that they'll block 2,500, 2,500, 2,500, 2,500, right? I've had early on when I didn't know this at a time, right? I mean, I'm bidding on 4, 5, 6 properties. And so you have, $12, $15, $18,000 blocked on your credit card, right? If you can handle that, that's fine. But I'm just saying it's a couple of days. It's not like they're going to keep your money. But just understand why they're doing it, because if you win and you're the winning bidder, at that point, they want you to basically sign a contract that they're going to send you. Now, even at this point, even though you're a winning bidder on the site, that does not mean the bank will award you that contract. At that point, that contract goes to the bank, and they have about 2 weeks to look at that contract and say, well, yeah, we said we're going to take it, but they may just change their mind and say, well, no, put it back on the market. Happens all the time. It's frustrating. Happened to me on a stupid property in Westchester not too long ago, right? And I believe somebody from Mastery got that property later because the bank just decided they're going to just pull it off the that particular auction website, right? It's just one of those things. I gave my earnest money. I did everything. But I mean, it is what it is, right? So you just got to live with it. So just keep that in mind, that's one of those things. And with auction.com, there's nothing to be scared of. If the property goes up beyond the price you want to bid, don't worry about it. Just rebid again when it comes back up, because you'll see it come back up every 2 weeks, until they finally dump the property. So that's just kind of how it is. So the other follow-up question was on Hubzu. Hubzu does not allow proxy bidding, but allows a auto bidding from different investors. Is there a way we could tell what the maximum bid the other investor has in the system? Guys, listen, it's impossible to tell what somebody else has as a bid. I mean, there are people who will just foolishly bid up the property and buy a property overpriced, right? I mean, there's just no way of you understanding what kind of stupidity the other person's up to. Sometimes nobody bids and you're like, oh my God, and you actually win the bid and you're like, did I make a mistake, right? If you're not constantly thinking about this, there's something wrong, right? So it's called, whenever you miss something, oh my God, I should have bought it, right? Whenever you buy something, oh my God, I wonder I paid too much, right? This is natural human tendencies. So you're not unique, you're not alone. But no, there's no way of knowing. Do you need an attorney when buying online auction properties? This is a loaded question, right? If you know what you're doing, do you need an attorney? No. Right now, having said that, I bought, a few hundred, if not a few thousand properties, right? With all this, obviously, clearly through all the people from Mastery that I've worked with, right? Literally 19, 20,000 properties and counting, that in some shape, way, or form, we were a part of it because of Mastery also, besides my own investments. And do I need an attorney? No, I don't need one. Do I use one in Illinois? Yes, I do, right? I use Gina Diaz from Mastery. And it's not that clearly I understand the contracts. That's just how the business is done here. Hence, we use it, right? Nobody can force you to use an attorney. If you feel that qualified, and in my opinion, where I goof up a lot of times, I don't read the contract because I'm in a rush a lot of the times, and I'm like, oh, it's a standard contract, I'll sign it sometimes, and then Ms. Gina will catch it, and then she's like, oh, did you agree? I'm like, oh, I agreed to it. It's not that I don't know what these contracts mean. I've dealt with them. The problem is sometimes you get a bit too full of yourself and you're not paying attention, you're too much in a rush, and then you miss something, right, that you should have read. And I've done that at times, just didn't do it on purpose, but it happens, called a mistake. So an attorney is always good because they can, take a look at it. Can they do anything about an auction contract? They cannot. They absolutely cannot. So if you're in Mastery and you're going to bid on these, just please check base with us, right? If you're not, I would highly suggest you get an attorney. At least then they'll make you aware of what you are signing, right? So at least you understand how this works, but go to an attorney that really understands this, because most attorneys, I promise you, they may be great attorneys. This is a specialized type of business, and most attorneys do not understand this side of the business. So just a word of caution. Next thing is, Robert was asking, how much capital does it take to start? So I'm assuming, I don't know if he's talking specifically about auctions or if he's talking about in general with real estate, right? Guys, listen, the beauty of real estate is this, that a lot of times people will say, well, you don't need any money, right? I agree. It's not like you necessarily need money out of pocket, right? But you need a lot of hustle, right? If you don't have money, you better have a lot of hustle, meaning you have to be the guy or gal to go make these things happen. Meaning if you're looking for properties, if you're doing anything, if you don't have the money, you're going to have to JV with somebody. If you're from Mastery, you get the money through private money lending. But otherwise, you're going to have to JV with somebody, or you're going to have to wholesale the property, right? So generally, it's not necessarily that you need to have any cash. Like people who come to Mastery, to me, if they don't have a lot of cash, that's okay. But you need to have some source of income. So let me kind of explain that, because some people are going to say, well, but I don't have that much source of, you don't need that much. You just need a source of income. Even if you drive Uber, but you're driving 40 hours a week, right? You're going to make about 60 to 80,000. Probably you're not going to make much more generally. You're going to make less if you don't drive enough, right? And that income is fine. Why is that important? The reason why it's important is because then your daily expenses are met. So then you're not as desperate to basically go out and do wild things, right? So as long as you don't need any money, as long as you have a source of income to put food on the table. Where things go wrong for people is that they have very little to no money and they suddenly do one or two flips, or they have one success and they quit what they do. They quit their day job. You can't do that, right? So you don't necessarily need money in terms of getting started, or even at buying for auctions, right? Early on when I was buying at sheriff's sale, DuPage County. And I didn't have, the first property I bought literally today is probably worth $300,000, right? At auction, and I paid $65,000. And I was scared. And I was scared because I didn't have enough money, right? Maybe out of the 65, 15, 20 was mine, right? And that was on a home equity loan on a townhouse I used to live in. I still have that loan. I've still never paid that off, just on the principal of it, right? It's a small amount is remaining, but I never paid that off because that was my start, which was a $20,000 home equity loan. I already had a first mortgage from Chase, and I got that. And they approved me for $50,000 on a home equity loan because I thought I had equity in the property, which they said yes. But then this was 2008. They're canceling everybody's lines, everything. And when I go to withdraw the money at the bank, all they gave me was $20,000. So if you're going to buy a property at auction, and you think it's a great property, partner up. No big deal. Partner up with somebody who has the funds. You do the legwork of finding the property, getting it fixed up, and reselling it. So that's is your responsibility. Next part of it is to determine what is a good neighborhood to invest in for new investors, what to look for. So Solmara, I think it is, Solmara. So Ms. Solmara, that's a great question, right? What do I look for when determining what is a good neighborhood to invest? So there's a couple of trains of thought here you have to think about, right? If I'm a wholesaler, good, bad, indifferent, right? Meaning the neighborhood, as long as there are end buyers that are buying in that area, right? Then it makes sense to, to basically get the property under contract. Now, I would not try, unless you have cash from somewhere, I would not try to wholesale a property from auction unless you're an extremely seasoned investor. That's different, right? But you really need to have your ducks in a row. Like if I'm bidding on a property, I win it. If I'm not going to keep it, it's a good property in Mastery, I'm going to just give it to somebody in Mastery. It's okay. I don't have to buy all of them. That's perfectly fine. But if you don't have that capability, don't go willy-nilly bidding on these properties. Now, the way I did it, the way I bought from Sheriff Sales, I had a few people I had spoken with. And so at that time, I used to borrow 20 for 3-4 people to do one deal. And then I'd pay back everybody with phenomenal returns. Phenomenal. I mean, to give you guys an example, there's a friend of mine at one time, he gave me to borrow, not gave it to me. He had a $20,000 investment when I started. So he had other businesses. He didn't need the money from here. He's like, man, I just want the money to grow. And I'm like, okay, I'll do all the work. I was desperate, right? And so I took his $20,000, and then about a year and a half later, he put in another 20. So he gave me $40,000. When it was all said and done, I gave him 7 houses. Think about that. 7 houses, right? Literally, I gave him almost close to $2 million. Well, 7 houses, one portfolio, another couple of houses, another. So close to $2 million in profit on those. But I mean, that was what was needed. So you're going to have to partner up with somebody if you're going to buy properties at auction. If these are properties that you can finance, then you're going to need about 10 to 15% down payment based on the purchase price and rehab. So what I mean by that is, let's say you're buying the property for 110. Rehab on the property is, say, $30,000. So then you're going to have to come up with 10% if you have a good amount of experience. If you don't, then you're going to have to come up with 15%. And that doesn't have to be your money. That can be money from a partner. If you decide to partner up with somebody, that's okay, right? The banks will give you a loan based on that. So the other thing was that how does one determine a good neighborhood when you're new? So I got a little bit off track over there. And the way you look at a neighborhood is, first, I would always start with number one, where do I live, right? So if you live, let's just say hypothetically, I don't know where you live, right? If you live, let's just say in a C area. So A would be a area like Oak Brook, right? Where we're at, Lombard. Right? This would be called an A area, aspirational, affluent people, most of them, not all, but most of them, right? Higher income, higher expenses, higher earning power. That's who lives in the area. So I'd identify, okay, do I live in an A area? Do I live in a B area, right? Which is more bread and butter, may have some kind of expensive people, but the income is not going to be as much. Do I live in a C area? What is a C area? C area has some more challenges, may have a little bit more crime. Right. So if I consider, say, A area for Oak Park, right? Drawing a blank today. Oak Brook. Then maybe Berwyn would be a BB plus. Certain part of Cicero, I would say, would be a B. Then it would be a C in the middle over there by the by 22nd, and then as you go up, intersection of Roosevelt and Austin, right? That pocket I would call a C, right? Because that's where you have a high density of a lot of multi-units, and then you get a lot of problems, like gang problems, right? So that would be a C. What would be a D? Would be a disaster area, where there are too many wrong things going on. People are leaving, there's mass exodus, property values are really bad. That would be a D. So first thing I would start with is identifying, okay, where do I live? Do I live in an A area, B area, C area? And wherever you live, there are opportunities. Even in D areas, there are opportunities. They just look a little different. At the end of the day, you're looking for a deal, be it an A area or be it a D area. You're looking for a deal for that given condition, and then you're going to improve it, right? So number one is look in your neighborhood, which is what is the area. Then you're going to go into a bandwidth of about half an hour, kind of a, generally in that. Then you start doing what we call is area selection. For today's conversation, I don't have time to get into all the stats and all that stuff. That's for mastery. But that's the first place to start. And then also you have to think about, am I going to do a flip? Am I going to do a rental? Am I going to do a wholesale? If you're doing a wholesale, as long as there's a back-end market, who cares what the area is? Now, I'm not going to go to certain areas where there's a danger of being robbed, mugged, shot, one of those things. Well, yesterday they were shooting in Oak Brook, so nowadays you never know. But just saying that generally I'm not going to put myself in the harm's way. But you may say, Andrew, I grew up in the area. It's a tough area, but I know there's a lot of activity. There's a lot of pockets of Chicago that are tough, right? By our standards, living out in the suburbs. But over there, it's just normal. So if you're comfortable with that, that's fine. But you have to understand, number one is area selection. Number two, what you have to think about also is, okay, what am I looking for? Am I going to be doing a flip here? Am I going to be doing an Airbnb? Am I going to be doing a rental? Based on that, your area is going to change a little bit because that gets adjusted. So when you talk about, finding good deals, it always starts with, number one, who am I? Where do I live? What is my profile as an investor? What will make the most sense for me? Number two, it's called area selection. Which are all the pockets that I'm going to look at? And if there's an expensive pocket, I'm going to leave it alone. Like for me, Schaumburg, when I started 2008, was expensive. I couldn't buy properties there. I could buy Hanover Park. There's lots of distress. I could buy maybe Streamwood. Streamwood was a little bit better than Hanover Park at the time, right? Then Glendale Heights. Elgin at the time, I could go to those pockets because that's what I could afford. So that becomes the other issue for you to think about is that number one we talked about was basically who are you? Where are you coming from? Right? What are you trying to do? What are you trying to achieve? Then you have to think about, okay, what is the area selection? Then you get to a property selection. So that's kind of the process in which, and then you have to think about, okay, do I want an older property? Do I want a property it's a little bit newer? Bellwood would be a perfect example. If you look at east part of Bellwood, it's going to be right next to, drawing a blank, Maywood, right? It's right next to Maywood. So that pocket over there is not quite as desirable as the west pocket of Bellwood. Why? Because it's right next to Elmhurst. It's right next to Berkeley. Much nicer. So the influence basically from Maywood comes into the problems, the gang things come into Bellwood via the east. As you go towards the west, in Bellwood, the area just becomes nicer. So that's the other thing that you have to figure out is, okay, where am I going to invest, right? And we'll go through this in detail during the 3 days. So if you haven't registered, make sure you do, because we'll go through this as to how do we do it, right? Because most of the problem, whenever somebody loses money with the property, it's not because of rehab. Because if your rehab went over 10% and your rehab budget was, say, 30,000, what is your rehab budget now? 3,000 more? If it was 50,000, what is it? You went over 10%. Okay, so 50, it's going to be now 55,000, right? So, because that's all 10% is. Even if it's $100,000 budget, you go over 10%, 12%, it's not a big deal, right? Your profit may be a little bit less, but you're not going to lose money. But what happens for most people is, number one, they buy in the wrong neighborhoods. Like right now, right? We're doing a meeting for the North folks at Chicago RIA, one of the RIA meetings. Then we're doing one for people that are in the southern to western suburbs. And then we're doing a meeting for the Chicago, right, in Chicago, to help you identify and help you learn how do I find the hot spots, right? And we'll go through that during that meeting. I won't have time for that today. Okay, next question. Do you find, so for those of you, I just thought of it, that do not have a Zolk map, just go to Google and put Zolk, Z-O-L-K, Zolk maps, and it'll give you all the neighborhoods in Chicago divided, right? It's a great tool for you to use. And the other thing is called USA.com. Lots of stats, lots of data, huge amount of data. And it's all free. So you can go and pick that up because it has your density of the housing built, housing structures when they were put up, where the multifamilies within the town, where not the multifamilies, what is the ratio of the renters to owners, right? In that particular pocket. We always want to own rental properties where there are more homeowners because that's better for our property values because homeowners are more caring because their money is at risk. So, do you find the biggest money-making deals, this was Lee Carter, via short sale, expired, pre-foreclosure, auction, or off-market? Ooh, this is a tough one. Listen, I've bought properties from from short sales that are phenomenal. Phenomenal in terms of pricing. So I just bought a property recently up north. And I know I've talked about it a couple times. The wholesaler on that deal literally made $50,000. And I could see it, what they made on the HUD, right? I was happy with the purchase. I was happy with the price. So it was what it was, right? Good for the wholesaler. But it depends. You will find phenomenal deals with short sales. You'll find expired listings, phenomenal deals, right? I used to do cold calling to all expired listings at one time. I haven't done that for years and years and years. Pre-foreclosure, most of the times, is going to be either obviously somebody who's upside down, or sometimes it may be people who have some equity in them, and what to look for. Personally, you ask me, 60 to 70%, maybe even as high as 75% of all the properties that I own today guess where they came from? MLS, right? And people I'm like, I can give you the addresses. You can look it up at the 3-day. We have hundreds of addresses on the boards. You can look them up. You'll find a lot of them from MLS. Why? Because I was the agent when I started. And so I learned how to use the MLS really, really well and understand the values. And there are a lot of deals. People who work short sales, right? They find a lot of properties. So it's not like one is better than the other, right? It's just that what do you work at? I've literally bought properties at auction when you say pennies on the dollar. So property in Streamwood, we showed it to everybody in Mass Street. We bought it for $26,000. $26,000 completely rehabbed because somebody bought the second lien and I went and bought the first lien and that guy got wiped out completely, right? Lost close to $130,000. Feel bad for him, but it is what it is. He wasn't paying attention and he bought the second lien. So I would not look at it as what is more. There are certain strategies that are easier. Obviously, looking for properties in the MLS, even today with Zillow, because I don't have my license anymore. I put my license on ice. I didn't renew it this time. I like the MLS, because I know how to work it, right? I know how to work it. Same thing with auctions. I like auctions. Most people are terrified of sheriff sale auctions. I'm not, because I've done so many of them. So those are the two big places. Now, in the last year and a half, we started doing a lot of off-market properties. Hence, I found a lot of off-market properties, spent a lot of money doing it, but we found a lot of off-market properties. So if you were to ask me, right, what is the best place? To me, it's always going to be MLS, because that's where I started, right? Now, having said that, if you get good at off-market deals, oh my God, you will beat MLS hands down, period, because these are off-market properties. You don't have other people generally competing with you, right? You've marketed for it, you've gotten the lead, so you have a huge leg up. The next question was, what is the easiest, safest route to secure that elusive final deal in real estate, most likely a wholesale? Okay, so I don't know if Lee is asking whether he is trying to get a deal from a wholesaler he's trying to secure, or he wants to have the deal and then wholesale it. That's the part of it I'm confused about. So Lee, come back with this question. I like the question, but just come back with it, please. Next time we do this, it's going to be either Friday or next Monday. I mean, for sure, I'm going to be here Friday, but we'll address this question at that time. So having said that, I went a little bit long today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed some of these thoughts, some of these ideas. Again, make sure, if you haven't, register for the 3-day. If you're going to bring a buddy, pal, spouse, make sure you let us know. It's a complimentary ticket for your spouse for the regular. If they're going to come as a VIP, then I think it's $100 or something. That's all it is. So, but make sure you're there, and make sure you're there early. Register as early as possible so that the VIP tickets are not gone, because those are in limited quantity. Having said that, guys, please invite your friends, invite your family, and we have a giveaway for everybody that invites a bunch of people. The person who has the most invites, we'll put everybody's name in the hat, and the one who does the most invites will pick the name out. Hopefully it's you. So having said that, thanks a bunch, and have